We're waiting for it to go live.
Oh, it does that when it's time to do that. I understand now why it would do that.
Good morning, comrades. You are listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning, Comrade. Today on the show, we got Jeff and Robert. We're
Hello.
having a good old time. What's going on, man?
A lot of things. I have a cat update. So,
you know, I love the cat updates.
This cat, man, it's just getting wilder and wilder. Let me tell you. So
you got a cat, so just lay it out for the audience who hasn't.
Okay, who's not if you're not listening, you need to listen to the old episodes with this cat. So this poor kitten was darting around the street trying not to get murdered, and then it climbed up in my car behind the engine block, survived the ride home. We had to lure the cat out and trap the cat, and the poor little kitten, we had to trap it in one of those little traps. And we took it to the.
Okay, it's like one of these traps that doesn't do harm. It's not like
it's the one the animal control people have.
Yeah.
So we trapped her, and then we
took a giant mouse trap that would snap over the cat's head or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't think the cat would be alive if it was. So we trapped the cat. We named her Henry. Took her to the vet. The vet said the cat's fine. Get the cat home. You notice the cat's I don't want to say limping, but just not putting all of her weight down on her back leg. And so we take the cat back to the vet. We get the cat x-rays. And lo and behold, we find out that someone has shot this cat with a BB gun. The BB is lodged inside of her leg. Apparently it shattered her leg, but she's so young that her leg instantly started to heal. So her leg set on its own. Huh?
She's like Wolverine?
I guess so. I mean,
good for her.
Yeah, this poor little cat, man, it's been through so much, and it's only been alive for 8 weeks or less. And it's been shot at, had to run for its life, got just terrified out of its mind, survived multiple car rides in the engine block of cars.
No, it's not just riding in the back seat.
Yeah,
it's riding in the back seat like a cakewalk.
It's just what kind of savage, what kind of, pun unintended animal, because this is the kind of person I would beat with my bare hands to death. This is that's wild. It's so depressing.
That's a badass little kitten.
Let's shoot a kitten with a BB gun. Cool. So it's lodged inside of her leg. It's lodged in the muscle. You can see it. So we're gonna take her. We're gonna call an orthopedic surgeon and see if it's even worth. Is it gonna affect her? Is it gonna do more harm to putting kitten under anesthesia to get it out? Does it even need to come out? And if it does,
I know you already have a three-legged dog and Johnny.
Yeah, the cat's fine though. The cat's running around. It doesn't. She's not hiding that she's in pain like animals do, because she is zipping around the house, jumping off stuff. You can already see her. I swear to God, we've had her 5 days, and I swear she's already gotten a third of the size bigger. And I see her looking at shelves, being "Oh, can I do this?" And she's like, "No, not yet." But she's definitely thinking about it. So I got to thinking about something. Oh, I tell you what I was thinking about it, because I usually go on knowledge rabbit holes at work, to where I have my little Google Pods in, and I just listen to podcasts or I listen to random YouTube videos. Honestly, I haven't been listening to a lot of politics because it shit depresses me, and it doesn't put me in a good. Honestly, it's not even that it depresses me. It doesn't put me into a good workflow. Mm-hmm. So I like to listen to things that put me in a workflow. So I was listening. I was I never knew what big cats are domesticated cats most. They're I was thinking about this cat. What's the closest relative to domesticated cats for big cats? Well, apparently, the genus is the Siberian tiger, or known as the Amur tiger. I'm saying that wrong. It might be Amir. But it's the tigers that live on the border of China and Russia in the Siberian tundra. And these things are
tigers, the steppe tigers, essentially.
Yeah. This is going on the radio, right? So I can't curse, but I would curse about these tigers if I could. You should, we got that, you go to the zoo and you see a tiger, or at LSU, we got Mike the tiger. Imagine two of those, in your mind, tigers you've seen at the zoo standing on top of each other, like one stacked upon another.
Big boys.
And then like big, thick boys. Like these tigers are not joking with you. And I read, so it got me on down a rabbit hole. There's a guy who wrote a book called, I think it's called The Tiger. It might even just be called Tiger. But I looked up the story. This is 100. What I'm about to tell you is like 100% true story. I'm going to get all the, I'm not going to give names. I'm just going to tell it off the top of my head, but there's like, you can, no, you can like totally look this up. This is not some kind of BS. So this wasn't like a million years ago, like in the 1800s or something. This was like 1997, I believe. It was definitely in the late 90s, almost 2000s. So there's this guy who's a logger and lives in Siberia, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like out, he's doing his hunting thing, and he finds like a boar that's been mangled, like obviously by a Siberian tiger. But he's like, oh, there's no tiger around. Like, bro, there's always a tiger around. Like there's like a folk, like one of the folk sayings is, if you see a tiger for 1 second, he's been watching you for 1 hour. But so this guy thinks it's a good idea that he's gonna like, oh, free pig for me to eat. Strike one, that's mistake number one. So he's like, oh, he tries to get this. So he like packs up the boar and he's gonna like lug it back to his cabin or whatever. And the tiger's like, no, you're not. And so the tiger appears in the woods and starts to charge this dude. So the dude pulls his rifle out. He's got a gun and he shoots and hits the tiger, but doesn't kill it. That's strike two.
Right.
So he drops the boar and he goes home. He runs back home, whatever. That night, he hears all kind of tiger commotion. He can hear this thing. He can hear this thing outside of this huge, a literal monster outside his house. He comes out in the morning, just all kind of commotion. Everything, all his stuff, his like belongings that he's left out are just destroyed. So this guy sets off, doesn't know what to do. He sets off to his buddy's house, walks, I don't know how far, he's his buddy's cabin or whatever, tells him the story. His buddy says, get away from here right now. He goes, don't put your scent on anything around here. Just, I've got a family to worry about. You've like pissed off the czar of the forest. Like, get away from here. He goes to a logging camp. The logging camp people are like, good luck, but you got to get out of here. We don't want you around here. So he has no choice but to like, he goes home. And when he gets home, like when he's trying to like get back in that tiger's just waiting on him. It's just waiting on him. And it's been literally waiting for him for like 3 days. And it just mauls him and eats him.
Wow.
So this tiger was like, no, you've offended me. And I am God here. And like, you don't steal from me. And he mauls and eats the dude. So the like Siberian Russian Wildlife Service has to come out. And they're like, well, obviously we have to kill this tiger. And they hunt the tiger. They've got dogs or whatever. And it's just like you would think of in a movie. This is like some kind of Stephen King. I'm surprised there hasn't been like a movie made. It's like a Stephen King story. So right. The dogs are like terrified. They're out in the woods, of course, because they can sense the tiger. Nobody can see this tiger. This huge again, a literal monster just lunges at them from out, and it's just like attacking everyone. It swipes a couple dudes, puts them down. This guy, like the tiger, literally pounces on a guy, is gonna like rip out his jugular. He managed to stick his rifle in the tiger's mouth before he like bites on his jugular and shoots it and kills it.
Wow,
unbelievable story. One of the forest rangers or whatever, he's quoted as saying like, without all the evidence, and if this didn't happen in in 1997, if I told you this story without video evidence, there's no way you'd believe it. But yeah, it's like, it's so awesome to me that like, it doesn't, that's why I'm like, I like horror movies and I like scary, but I don't need to watch all, like, there's so much terrifying stuff. The idea that there's like literal monsters out there once you go too far from humans that will hunt and kill you for sport because you piss them off. Mm-hmm. It's respect to that tiger, respect to a real one.
I respect lions. I respect tigers. I respect
lions are like, that's the difference though. Like lions are, for everything I've read or known, like lions are not monstrous like that. They're social animals. Like there's that whole story of the guys who took care of that lion. You can look at it on YouTube or whatever, but you can, again, this is something else I'm not making this up, but the guys are like, they take care of this lion cub since he was a kid, but they're like, oh, we can't have a lion cub, whatever. They like socialize it with other lions, and they eventually like release it into the African Sahara, like Africa. And then they're like, hey, it'd be a good idea. Like 3 years later, let's go try to like see if this lion's still out here. So these dudes like track down this lion, and it's like the lion, and the lion remembers him. The lion was like a house cat, like coming up to like the dude and like circling and rubbing all on his leg. And the lion's like trying to lead him. And the lion like literally takes him to his pride. Like he's running a pride. And, he's got like his harem of like lionesses. And he's like introducing these two dudes to the other lions, because they're like social animals. But these tigers, they'll murder other tigers. They don't want like a tiger has like a territory. It could be like 300 miles, dude. And like they want any other tiger in that area. Like they
out of here.
They are filled with nothing but just hate. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful to me. I love it. I love it. It's so.
You love that they want to like have a dead zone and like want nothing to live in that space.
No, it's just humbling.
Yeah.
It's just humbling to think of just like there's these creatures out here that just don't give. They just don't care. Mm-hmm. I think going back to the horror movie analogy, like the horror movies that like get my. This goes back to where we were talking about the kitten and like existential dread. The horror movies that get my like brain juices flowing are not the ones where it's like, oh, there's a serial killer, or it's usually something almost supernatural, but like without even a purpose. Like it's not even mad. Like Aliens is one of my favorite movies because they're just forces. They're forces of nature that just don't. You are so insignificant in this grand scheme of things.
And later Alien movies make the first Alien movie worse, by the way?
No, not at all. You just ignore I mean, there hasn't I haven't watched the Prometheus sequel.
Mm-hmm.
But also I liked Prometheus because it has that same existential dread. It has the same because for years, like as a guy who's like really into aliens, everybody's like, "Ooh, the space jockeys! We're gonna find out about the space jockeys." And then like the space jockeys created human beings, and guess what? They hate you. Like I love that. I absolutely love the idea of just like I don't care about you. You are nothing.
Well, I mean, and the way I think about that is like the thing that created human beings is essentially, in a certain sense, God. And in a sort of philosophical sense, sort of thinking about it in the sense that like God does not care about your existence and he actually resents it is actually really interesting from that perspective. Does that make sense?
Sure. No, I think we're saying the same thing. To be like the opposite of that is somebody who's just like I'm trying to think of a horror movie like that doesn't do anything for me. Something like The Exorcist or like any of those slasher movies where there's just like so many rules, and it even treats the victims as like treats the victims as these like special people. Like, you've got to go to Camp Crystal Lake and you've got to be a camp counselor because Jason's mom was mad at the kids. It's so many. No, I don't. It's just so many. Oh, you're so afraid. Like think of Friday the 13th, but the Freddy Krueger.
And I think we should actually pursue this line of questioning a little bit further. You're listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. It's good comrade Jeff and Robert on the show. We're talking all of a sudden, unexpectedly, about slasher flicks. And I think that when you think about what you were talking about with the Prometheus thing, with an actual philosophical angle, and something like like the actual slasher flicks, like the ones that you would think with like Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees or whatever, or Michael Myers. Like there's a different kind that is an entirely different kind of horror movie. If you know what I mean.
Sure.
Like there's almost like an intended safe formula.
Yes.
That is designed to be consumed by a particular audience. Like it's for consumption. It's not trying to like Alien's different. It's a blockbuster,
No,
but
what I was gonna say is I think you hit on something. I think I'm just like talking about the writing, like the actual like the way the story is formed. When you said something about like being safe, I think that not like safe for consumption. I think that by adding the reason why things like Alien and like existential, the reason why like this tiger thing
actually is scary, right?
No, it's terrifying, and I'll tell you why. Like the reason why that's scary, and like why this tiger thing is like that Siberian tiger that'll eat you because you pissed it off is so terrifying and fascinating at the same time, is because like your normal movies like Saw or like I said Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, like those kind of things, they're made to like with all these rules to give the audience a sense of like safety. It's to keep like so the audience can sit through it. It's more digestible. And I'm not saying the same thing you say as like consumer. I mean, you're creating a safe space to be like, oh, this wouldn't happen to me because my parents didn't kill Freddy Krueger, so he wouldn't get into my dreams. Alien is just like there's no rule. Like it does. Like you come in contact with this thing, it's trying to murder you. It doesn't ask you 50 questions about who, what, when, why, where you are. You didn't, the same thing with this tiger. Like this tiger, you offended it. You offended it by coming into its domain, and you tried to steal from it, and you came for the king and you missed. So now it's like it's on. Like it's my sole focus is to murder you. You are on the menu now.
I want to address a comment that Torches and Pitchforks is making. It says they say garbage, of course. Friday the 13th was all about side boob shots. I got no problem with side.
No, that's crazy. Friday the 13th is good, especially like the first. That's crazy. The first. I mean, they are what they are, but like the idea of this thing that comes from wherever, and I know it's been explained now, and like by explaining it is kind of stupid. But the idea of like a mother,
it sounds like you're doing Scream just by explaining it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the idea of a mother who like was pissed off because the camp counselors weren't watching her kid, it's pretty awesome. Like that's a good horror story. I like that. Mm-hmm. But like Friday the 13th is fine. It's not bad. But like have you seen which
3 Friday the 13th were like, well, the first 2 at least were a little bit like before the movie series went like mainstream.
Yeah,
there was a certain like ambiguity as to who the monster or who the killer was, right?
Or it just didn't matter.
The second one
you were there for the kills.
Yeah,
well, it just didn't matter.
At the end of the day, like the plot line is just window dressing, just for the plot. Which, by the way, like, and to sort of like thread this needle a little bit, like the point, and I'm not trying to be like an elitist or whatever here, but like the audience or the intended audience of a movie like Aliens, despite the fact that like Aliens was a huge blockbuster, like it was intended to be sort of a smarter movie that was playing to a sort of like audience that thinks of itself as smarter than the average bear, if you know what I mean.
I mean, it was just, I don't know if smart's the word for it. I would say it's just it's existential. It's existential horror. Like even the poster tagline is in space, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah, there was a philosophical sort of like intention that's present in the Alien movies that is not necessarily maybe I just don't see it, but it's not necessarily present in the Jason Voorhees movies, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Except for that one, what would you say is the worst Aliens movie? I don't count the Alien versus Predators, and I never saw the one where it's like in the city or whatever, the one that's supposed to be real bad, because that's just
I'm
like
not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. I have not seen an Alien. I'm gonna out myself as a boomer here, and say I have not seen an Alien movie since Aliens 3. Like, I literally,
you didn't watch Resurrection?
That doesn't count.
You didn't watch Resurrection?
No.
It's a weird movie. It's made by the same guy who the guy who directed the French guy who directed City of Lost Children and Kronos, the guy who used like Ron Perlman as his muse like forever. That's why Ron Perlman's in that movie. It's weird. It's like an art piece. It's got Brad Dourif in it or whatever. That is that his name? The guy from Dune, the guy who was like Mentat, Piter Debris, the guy from Deadwood, the guy who does the Chucky voice. What else? He's been in everything. He's Grim and Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings. But no, he rocks. It's like
I remember that movie because I was in high school when it came out.
Right.
I still haven't seen it, but
we should watch it someday. It's got Winona Ryder in it. She's
Winona Ryder was too, right? Yeah,
she's super hot as always. We should watch it. It's not terrible. People think that's the worst one. I don't. I would say honestly, if I had to pick one that's not in that like series of movies, because again, I don't count Alien versus Predator, even though I enjoyed the only Alien versus Predator I've seen. I did too. I enjoyed it because that
was actually a date movie for me.
What, you fool? You didn't get laid after that. Nope. You dodo. Why are you taking her to see that?
Her idea.
Okay.
No, dude, I don't like horror movies.
That movie's not a horror movie. It's an action movie.
Yeah, we didn't know that.
It's an action movie. But like, I would say Alien Resurrection is the worst Alien movie, but I would not call it a terrible movie, even though a lot of people would. A lot of people are out of their mind and they smoke the hardest crack cocaine of all time, and they're going to sit there with a straight face and tell you Alien 3 was bad, which they're out of their gourd. I mean,
if you only watch Aliens and Alien 3, like if you only watch the first 3, Aliens 3 is the worst of the 3, but it's not a bad movie.
It's not bad at all. Like, it's not even close to being bad. That movie's the only thing is how I guess they couldn't get Michael Biehn, so they just killed Hicks off for like no reason. And I don't know what else was. I'm trying to think if something was bad about that movie. That movie was good. And then like
that movie, it's just
Aliens is obviously that's a Vietnam movie. Like that's like the that's the Star Wars of horror, I guess you could say. Which Aliens is not a horror movie, one? Huh?
The second one,
yeah, because it's obviously it's Vietnam. That's the whole point. It's okay. So
Aliens. Okay, if that's the case, at the end of Aliens, like Ripley just pulls out the fucking mech suit or whatever, and pushes the alien, queen out of the spaceship.
Yeah, but that was just one colony on one planet. That there was aliens are the Viet Cong, and I don't mean that to like the Viet Cong are awesome, and also are xenomorphs.
Sure,
but that's the whole point. Because you remember, like the aliens, the Space Marines are just like, we're gonna come down there and we're gonna get some, and they're like, don't. And I can quote that movie where Hicks goes, "Don't worry, Ripley, we got you're with a bunch of bad behinds." And you've got a whole squadron of bad behinds to take care of you. We got Sonic ball breakers and ball busters. We got pulse rifles. We got sharp sticks. Because the whole idea was this cocky technological force going against this like primitive
primal,
thing.
Yeah, this primal, like unstoppable.
And the aliens crawled through the vents.
And
tunnel rats.
But the other thing about the aliens in those movies, to kind of like get another step deeper, is that they're like incredibly adaptable, and they're incredibly like sneaky in a certain sense. Like when you don't know that somebody's had a face hugger that has like planted the seed in them until it bursts out of their chest. You know what I mean?
No, exactly. Have you ever seen, kind of a segue? Have you ever seen? I just recently saw it as like a Star Wars guy, and I'd never seen this before. And I think it might have even been with James Cameron because they were discussing aliens and Star Wars. I think it was definitely George Lucas, but he might have been James Cameron interviewing him. And my thing about James Cameron is, to get this out, James Cameron just makes the same movie over and over again and just resells it to you, and it's kind of annoying. But anyway,
like I think that's pretty awesome, actually.
He literally makes the same movie. Like The Abyss
That's
is
fine.
The Abyss is the same movie as Avatar, is the same movie as Aliens, as the same movie as like Terminator. But anyway, Terminator 2.
Terminator's different.
Terminator. No, it's the same. It's the same themes. But anyway. So they were talking about like, politics or whatever, and George Lucas was just like, he says what everybody's always said. He goes, oh yeah. He goes, Star Wars is about Vietnam War. He's like, yeah, the Ewoks are. He's like, the rebels are Viet Cong, and so are the Ewoks. Obviously, like that's exactly what it was. And then he goes, yeah, and then the sequels are about the Iraq War. Cool. Like, just so nonchalant. And I was like, I'd never seen that. And I was just like, yeah. I was like, that's what I've said forever. And
Time right, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The time, yeah, that's what he did.
But I will say that like the mood and the feel and a lot of the like reality of those movies is a little bit off from that. Like I don't know. Huh?
Like how?
There is so first off, if you want to talk the Star Wars prequels, and apparently we're doing that tonight, which I didn't expect to do, but that's okay.
They're hot with the memes now. The stock is up on Star Wars prequel memes.
You're right about that.
You can never push it down. Like as soon as the Star Wars meme stock like pushes down, it just hits support and bounces right back up. I'm telling you.
All right. If there is a best Star Wars prequel, which like again, I'm not like a prequels hater, by the way. I'm not like one of those people either.
Man, they're trash.
What?
They're trash. I'm a prequel hater.
You are? Okay, that's fine.
Oh, yeah.
But the second one, where like the Palpatine decides to like assume the essentially like the Imperator role, from the Senate is like super real, and like so and it's relatable to like IRL from that time period, because like every president since that time period, and this is years after 9/11, right? The first one was like 20 like 2000 perhaps,
right?
Maybe 99. The second one was like slightly after 2001 rather. My dates might be off, but like the expansion of sort of like imperial power of the U.S. presidency, and the sort of like story going in that direction was very, very like parallel, if that makes any sense.
No, it's exactly what Lucas was going for. My thing though is that's exactly what he was going for, without a doubt. What the prequels do, like incredibly well, and I don't know if George Lucas was trying to go for this. And I'm not really willing to call him Comrade George, but he definitely has.
He's a capitalist.
Well, there's some. I'll get into that. He's definitely a capitalist, but but the stuff that he wrote, what the prequels do more than anything is they show that how just disgusting and like ridiculous and villains in their own right the Jedi Order is.
Yeah,
the Jedi Order are just like ineffective liberals.
But pathetic.
Like they're the worst. They're literally like the Jedi Order is the Democratic Party. Yeah, they're just like, how could this have happened? I don't understand. Why don't the Sith play by the same rules that we have set up that you should play by? And it's like, because they're the Sith.
Yeah.
Like, how did you not detect the Sith?
Why don't you
like we can't stop slavery? Like the whole thing of just like we're people with space magic and laser swords, and this child that's the chosen one is down on this planet, and he's held his mother and himself are both slaves, and they're slaves to this like little flying weirdo creature. And there's like
a little bit anti-Semitic. Let's not lie.
Yeah, it is. But like he goes, but here's the Jedi master plan. We've got space swords and magic. You're a slaver. We can just stop slavery, or we can play this like Rube Goldberg type game, like Zelda Fetch Quest, where I'll win a race and you get a cube, and we'll trade the cube up the street, and then you will let one of them go and keep the mother as the. I was like, if that's not the Democratic Party, like just negotiating for no reason.
Yeah, just negotiating down from any position you could possibly have. I will say the one thing that we got out of that terrible negotiation with Watto was the pod race scene, which was a dope ass scene.
That's not. When's the last time you watched that?
It probably 10 years ago.
It looks so bad.
It doesn't look good. Doesn't hold up.
So bad because all the CGI.
Remember? Okay,
so
first off, so let's pause for station ID. You're listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade, goodmorningcomrade.com. Jeff and Robert talking about the pod race scene now from the Star Wars movie. That scene,
that is not pod racing.
1999 or whatever, like was so revolutionary for the time that they made an entire video game.
I mean,
that was
the sound design holds up. The sound design in that scene is, it's not Foley. That's not the right word, but however you like, the sounds are awesome, like the engine sounds and stuff. Yeah. But it does not hold up, my dude. It's just too much green screen.
I'm not saying I don't believe you.
Go. You got Disney Plus, right? Go get on the. I'll give you access to my account.
All right, cool.
Whatever. But well, the reason why I have to, so you got that's me putting my own spin on it to where like I hate the Jedis, like whatever.
No, I think that's okay. So let me just validate you for a second and say that's not like that's a decent read, if you know what I mean.
I don't think that's what he was going for. That's what I'm saying. No. There's circumstantial evidence if you want to get into the deep like Star Wars lore to where one of the characters, because so if you're a super Star Wars nerd, one of the characters, so you've got the liberals, which is the rebellion, right? Not even the rebellion, the New Republic, and it's like Mon Mothma, like the pretty lady with the short hair in the original movies, right? Mm-hmm. So she's like, many Bothan spies gave their lives for these plans, and she just looks off into the distance. So you got her right now. There's a off-screen guerrilla fighting that's going on, like that. Even the rebellion doesn't want to deal with them because they're guerrilla fighters, and it's led by a guy named Saw Gerrera, which is the worst writing ever. It's so thinly veiled that he's Che Guevara.
Yeah, and
that's his whole deal. His whole deal is just like, Mon Mothma, your rebellion sucks. He's like, you attack Imperial outposts with civilians are still there. And he's like, yeah, because they put them there because they know you won't attack them. They know I will. And he's like, and he literally says a thing. If you watch the kids cartoon for kids, there's a scene, you can look it up. It's in Star Wars Rebels where Mon Mothma and Saw Gerrera are getting into it. And he goes, I hope one day when the rebellion's crushed and the Empire reigns unopposed, that you can look at the Imperial flag on your homeworld and know that at least you fought by the rules.
Like owned by your own logic liberal shit, right?
So dope. And he's voiced by Forrest Whitaker and everything. The video game. He's in like the newest video game. He's in that Star Wars Rebels.
Was in one of the movies though, wasn't he?
That's the dude. That's Saw Gerrera, the guy that's like, Bodhi, I'm tired of running, and he dies in the best Star Wars movie ever, which is Rogue One. That's
good movie. I like that movie.
That's the best one, dude. That's the one that felt. That's what I've always wanted. I always wanted a Dark Horse comic, a Dark Horse Star Wars comic, because they did the Star Wars comics back in the day. I wanted that on the screen, and I got it. And I'm like, Disney, I don't need nothing else after that. Like, it felt real. Like, it was like, oh, this is how an actual revolution would be, an actual rebellion. Like, it had stakes. Like, you're like, nobody had plot armor.
Mm-hmm.
It had reverse plot armor. Hi, Lauren, and it is Brad Dourif. Yes, you're not late at all. Brad Dourif's awesome, but it had reverse plot armor because all these characters had to die because
that was the point.
They're not in after the Battle of Yavin.
They're not the main character,
right? So it's like reverse plot armor, but that's the best Star Wars movie. I dare anybody.
What do you make of the ones that came like late? The ones that were the new ones.
Those are trash. Absolute trash.
I saw the first two and I skipped the last one.
I've seen them all. One I saw Under Duress. I had to go see it. Like, for real. I had to go. It was like a work thing. The last one, the one that's like really bad. And the other I was like, oh, whatever. I was like, the one that was just like, we're just doing this again. I was like, oh, okay.
You know what was really, really interesting about the first one? I only watched the first two, right? The thing that I thought about the first one was that it had the exact same plot as the first Star Wars movie, like 100%, the exact same plot, like zero difference. The only thing that was different was instead of one planet being destroyed by the death machine, it was like a system of planets that were destroyed by the death machine.
I just don't understand, why do you have to do that? Who doesn't know the plot of this? Like, why did this why did this need to be made? Just tell me a story. Like, Rogue One is the way to go, and I hate to keep going back to that. Rogue One is the way to go. You don't need this like multiverse or the cinematic universe of like continuing after. No, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't need a new trilogy. Just tell a story. That, like, Star Wars, that's the thing I've agreed that. So it's supposed to be this huge galaxy where people have faster than light travel. Why is every damn story on Tatooine?
Why do they have so many goddamn human characters?
Like, why don't you tell me a story that just hasn't been told? That's all you have to do.
All right, to be a little bit weird about this, actually, and like
I can tell you about the human characters. I'm such a nerd on this. I can actually tell you about.
Well, I was actually going to get into a different Eddie, but if this is like in agreement with where you're at, hey Antifa, by the way, if this is going to get into a different area, like just smash the brakes for me. But like, did you ever play the old game, the Knights of the Old Republic,
the BioWare games? I tried.
You tried?
I bounced off of them.
All right. The thing that I liked about that, well, you would hate that because you hate Mass Effect.
I don't hate Mass Effect for the reasons you think I do, and we can talk about that.
All right.
But I was gonna say, I want to real quick before you go, because we're gonna take off. But I was gonna tell you about the reason why there's so many human characters is because so the Empire is a weird type of fascism. Their whole deal is that there's no more racism, there's no more sexism, there's no homophobia, but they're just fascists. They're just like, they hate, they consider human beings like they're the top of the food chain, and any other sentient life is below them. That's why they're always like subjugating other.
Pretty fast, by the way. That's pretty fast.
It's really fast. So at the end of like when the Empire's finally lost, they had to like do a peace treaty, because what happened was the New Republic let the Empire choose. They said, or not the Empire, they let the worlds. They said, look, we're the New Republic. We're going to give these people their space. If y'all want to be in the Empire, go ahead. Like, y'all want to be independent, like, we'll help you.
Localism.
Like, yeah, localism. That was their thing. So they're like, we're not going to kill these people. We're going to like let the Empire, we're going to do kind of what like the US did to Japan after World War II. They kind of bottled them up and like, you can't create any more. You can't make any more warships, whatever.
Yeah.
But so the main thing though is like the leader of the New Republic was like this big giant bird, and so it was kind of
Like Big Bird?
Yeah, he was like a big blue bird. And so it was kind of like the final.
Big Bird's yellow. Big Bird's yellow, okay?
Yeah, but the guy in Star Wars is blue. So it was this kind of final insult that the Empire had to sign a peace treaty with like a big bird instead of another human. But yeah, like the story that
by the way, sound like the end of the First World War in a lot of ways.
Yeah, very much so when you think about it. I've actually heard rumors that there's a script floating around for the final Star Wars movie, and it's supposed to be like really dark, like the kind of movie I wanted. Like I would just like lose my mind over. And the story, the thing that if I had George Lucas, if I had 5 minutes with George Lucas, the only thing he's ever done that's made me go, come on, man. Like it was when he re-edited the when he added those CGI scenes to the end of the movies, like, oh look, like the Death Star's blown up, everybody's partying on Tatooine, everybody's having a celebration on Naboo. Oh look, there's a huge victory party on Coruscant. No, there's not. There's Coruscant is the Imperial homeworld. Yeah. So if Coruscant, if the Emperor's dead, Death Star blows up. The next scene you should see, if you're going to do that scene, is you see New Republic rebellion drop ships with like Marines fast roping down them.
Yeah.
And then you see like stormtroopers like in the Imperial Palace, like trying to just board up everything, like getting ready for their last stand. Like that's what you would see. You would see a contingent of like loyalists in the street, and then also like a contingent of like civilians just like firebombing Imperial offices and stuff. Like that's the kind of stuff you would see, like guerrilla warfare. Yeah, it would be like the fall of Berlin. That's what it would be. Exactly. It would be the fall of Berlin is what it would be. And that's the movie I want made, and it's never going to happen. Yeah. But that's fine. Well, okay. I got Rogue One. Okay. I'm all right.
So I guess to that perspective or that point, like Hollywood's not looking to do class war type movies, if you know what I mean. Like that's why that's part of why, at least not maybe not the whole reason why, but that's at least part of why that's never come up, right? They're not trying to promote class struggle in their films, and like that point that you just specifically brought up is actually like, while it seems like a really awesome story because it is, inconceivable in Hollywood. Because it flies in the face of like the perspective, right?
It's just, well, I think it's simpler than that. And if you want to say,
it might otherwise be like a lack of imagination in terms of like how do you?
No, it's simpler than that, because in that franchise, it's really weird. Here's the thing that really bothers me about that franchise is that somehow, because George Lucas loves to just monetize and monetize and sell everything, like he'd sell the hubcaps off his car if you could paint the Imperial logo on it and make money. He doesn't care. It's that like the fashion, like it's in that series, it became like cool to role play as the fascists.
Yeah. Oh, Lindsay Ellis had a great video on.
And I'm like, I've been to. No, I haven't, and I should watch that. I like her a lot. I think I will after this is over. But like, I've been to Star Wars Land, and every kid I see walking around as a stormtrooper, it's like there's like failed parenting. Mm-hmm. It's so weird to me. Like, and you're talking to a grown, almost 40-year-old man. Like I went in full, like I had like a whole like X-Wing fighter pilot like get up, like I put together and went to Star Wars Land. So I'm like, it's not the dressing up. It's like, why would you want to dress up as not just a bad guy? I understand an anti-hero. Like why like the fascists are not cool. Like, but to a lot of people, they are. A lot of people who just, their brains are just wired for authoritarianism. And I think that's why a movie like that could never get made, because in all these Star Wars movies, you never see the Empire as like actually evil. They're kind of just these like bumbling bureaucrats. There's like bumbling bureaucrats with British accents, and you just never get to see. You never see them like, kill a bunch of Wookiees and kick them in a ditch. You don't see them like commit atrocities. But if you want to tell,
by the way, the closest you get is in the third prequel movie, the Operation 66 or whatever.
Yeah,
Order 66, where they do actually
kill Jedis.
They do actually do the big heel turn, which everybody already knew was coming, but that was played up in such a way that
it was pretty violent for
it was definitely extremely violent, but it was also framed in such a way that the movie is very intentional in this to do a moralistic tale of making it seem like if you didn't see that coming, it's almost your fault. If that makes any kind of sense, I
guess. But you got to understand, there's a lot of normies who don't know the extended universe of how that stuff came to be. So I'm willing to give people credit, especially Star Wars is such a normie. I mean, Lucas made it like that too.
No. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the intention is that so that it puts it in a position that even normies can see that if you didn't see this betrayal coming, if you didn't see Shawn Michaels throwing fucking Marty Jannetty through the barbershop window, that's Marty Jannetty's fault. You know what I mean?
All right, I get you. Yeah, and that goes back to them, the Jedi Order being ineffective liberals.
Yeah, bunch of losers.
But yeah, it'd be a cool story to tell.
Oh,
I think.
Oh my god, the villain is the villain is treacherous. I can't believe it.
Right. It'd be a cool story to tell, and I think it's been told in other media. It's definitely been told in video games. And especially if you play the old in the new Star Wars Squadrons game, which I love, and if you play the old TIE Fighter game, Fighter Pilot game, which I also love.
I have that game on the N64, I think.
No, you don't. You have Rebel Assault. You don't have.
Oh, then anything about the game I play on a computer.
Yeah, exactly. But the cool story to be told is that, okay, so if you're just somebody who grew up in the Empire, you would see the rest of the galaxy as this terrifying place where there's just slavery and barbarism run rampant, and you would see the rebellion as terrorists. And so you can sympathize with somebody who just grows up. You would almost see it as a defensive war, because you would be like, well, if we don't bring order to the galaxy, then they'll eventually push into here. So.
Yeah. Let me pause real quick for station ID. You're listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. Good morning, comrade. Good morning, comrade.com. So yeah, that's
super intense, right? Right. But yeah, I mean, I think.
What do you make of the Knights of the Old Republic games? Do you play?
I bounce off of them because I don't like the. That hit me in a time back in the day where I was like, why are we doing turn-based combat? But I understand those games have such a story to tell. I saw you on one of your Facebook posts where you had Mass Effect on your monitor. Right. And I was like, yeah, we're talking about BioWare. We're talking about.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we are talking about BioWare. I just want to let's not bury the lead on that particular point. And let's raise up the fact that I built some shelves in my closet in my office. Okay.
No, nobody cares. Nobody cares. This is the BioWare hour.
All right, let's talk about BioWare.
But those games are fine. I think I started on the second one because everybody made such a big deal about it. This is how much of a boomer I am. I rented those games at the last possible moment you could rent. It was at a place called Family Video in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was like, oh, video rental store. So I got all three and I beat them in a month. I played 2 first, then went back and played 1. That was a huge mistake because 1 is janky.
So when the first of those games came out, when the first Mass Effect game came out, I actually worked at a GameStop. So I was in a position.
I know you worked at a GameStop. Damn.
Yeah, I used to work at GameStop. I worked at a GameStop in Picayune, Mississippi, when after the storm, because it was about 2006 ish, 2007, maybe.
Midnight
this
Call of Duty.
What up?
Said midnight Call of Duty releases with the worst
Yeah, there
people
was.
on
Oh
earth.
my god, there was releases like they were midnight. Around this was around the time that Smash Brothers Brawl came out as well.
The Weezer.
But regardless, Mass Effect was so. My point here is that you could when you worked at GameStop, and maybe this is more of a commentary on GameStop than anything, you can literally just like say, hey, I want to like borrow this brand new game.
I've heard this.
You could take it home, you could play it as much as you want and bring it back, and they'll just like re-vacuum seal it so it's not a new game anymore, which is fucking dope, actually.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that before. But GameStop must have been
confirming. Jeff here is confirming you heard it here first, folks. Like, Good Morning Comrade, that is the reality. Like, they would just let you break open a brand new game, and you would still sell that to somebody. Some foreign people.
So wild. That working there must have been like one of the circles of hell. I had to be like,
horrible.
It's awful. Like, the people who go there are just like the weirdest.
Could you imagine?
Weirdest of the weirdos.
Not just any GameStop. The GameStop in Picayune, Mississippi, off of Exit 4 on I-59.
I mean, like, every time I've ever been in there, it's just the weirdest of the weirdo. Mm-hmm. Like, it's trying to like talk about video games to anybody who will listen. And just like the poor guy in there is trying to like hustle me $5. He's trying to like take all my money $5 at a time on like pre-orders I'm never gonna get. It's like a sad place, which it shouldn't be. I don't know. I've never felt at ease with the GameStop. I have a grudge with GameStop because I miss Babbage's. That place was awesome.
Well, how much money did you make off of GameStop though?
What's that?
How much money did you make off of GameStop?
Oh, I never owned any GameStop.
Oh, you didn't buy none?
No, it was way too expensive. I own AMC, and GameStop sucks anyway, dude. Like, GameStop sucks as like a company.
Buddy.
Like they think they're going to transition to esports.
Buddy,
they're drunk.
Buddy, I know they suck. I used to work there. All right.
Oh yeah, I mean I've heard every horror story you could possibly hear, having to hit like weird sales goals and getting nothing for it, like having to like trying to hustle kids out of like their cell phones so like GameStop could sell them in China. Just the weirdest, most predatory sales tactics.
The funny thing about Babbage's and GameStop is they were both subsidiary companies of Barnes and Nobles.
Yes, actually. I did know that.
They were, because I used to work for Barnes and Noble, like right after Hurricane Katrina. Right after Hurricane Katrina, I got a job at a Barnes and Nobles because we evacuated to Picayune, Mississippi. I'm sorry. Before we got to Picayune, we went to Destin, Florida, and I worked at the coffee shop at the Barnes and Nobles out there, which was like a very, very fascinating job, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like my, I guess, gateway into the GameStop life.
Barnes and Nobles were like people who didn't want to go to libraries because like the one homeless guy would be there.
Right.
That's the whole reason Barnes and Nobles and Borders even existed.
Well, I worked at the coffee shop, so I would be like the one that would sell the other thing about like Barnes and Noble back in the day is that like the person, like the homeless person, would just go into Barnes and Nobles, grab a book, and just sit in the coffee shop anyway. Right. Like it didn't matter. Like you didn't need to like buy books.
No, nobody did. I don't know anybody who bought books there. Not a one. Everybody just hung out at Barnes and Noble. It was so weird. It was a weird time. Like there's so many public spaces we could have been hanging out at.
They're still there.
Oh yeah, I know. They somehow survived Borders. I really don't understand.
Did not survive.
That's what I'm saying. They survived. They like Borders was supposed to shut them down. Like there was only supposed to be one.
What was the difference?
One bookstore.
I don't understand this dynamic though. Like
Borders had, for me, the difference was Borders had. This didn't matter. This is not why they lived or died. They had tabletop RPG stuff, and Barnes and Nobles didn't. Like Barnes and Nobles might have carried like some like TSR Forgotten Realms, like books, like campaigns, but they didn't carry like Dungeon Master's guides or like all kinds of stuff like that. Where like Borders did. And that was like pre-internet, so it's like if your local game store didn't have it, then Borders would.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, nobody was looking for like the monster compendium for Pathfinder except me. That's not why they.
Well, I think what happened in the thing that got Barden to the Nobles like out of the woods, I guess, if that's what you're saying. Like essentially you're saying the gaming angle was in Borders' favor.
But there was nothing. I'm just saying personally of like why.
Okay. Yeah. Every other comic book shop had that as well, right? But like Barnes and Nobles were the ones, like the only bookstore that decided like, hey, let's just do an e-reader.
They embraced the e-reader. Yeah. They embraced the Nook.
Yeah. That was the thing that saved them. It really was the thing that saved them, because like if not for that, there's like no reason to have this like store full of books anymore. Like honestly, like really the model of like smaller bookstores, like with specific books, makes a lot more sense than Barnes and Nobles, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, I look at these bookstores in the French Quarter. I don't understand how they're open, because it's like there's like 3 or 4 in like a 5 block, I guess. But I'm like, what is the least got to be like? You got a store in Decatur and you're selling books. That's true. The lease has got to be outrageous, unless it's so old they somehow own it. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know,
dude. Speaking of, and we can sort of like wrap up, but as far as like comic book shops and stuff like that too, like, is there a comic book shop near you?
Yeah,
at all?
It's like multiples. There's More Fun Comics on Oak. There's Crescent City on Magazine.
So there's a bunch of comic book shops around.
There's now? 2 that I know for sure. There's a 3rd that's near Tulane. I can't think of what it might still be Crescent City.
I know what you're talking about. I know which one you're talking about. Mushroom.
It's kind of by Mellow Mushroom.
No, not by Mellow Mushroom.
Oh, it's called Mushroom? I've never been in that. Yeah. I don't know.
I've been there. They have a lot of music and shit. Like they're like a like kind of a wild place.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. By the boot.
Yeah, right.
Where women have to like carry around those strips to test your drinks, because you're gonna catch a roofie in there for sure.
Buddy, it's been like that since I was a kid.
Jesus Christ, that whole man. You want to talk about crime in New Orleans? It go down next to Tulane on Broadway. That's where it goes down. It's wild over there. We got a lot of tabletop gaming stores too. I can't believe. I think it's still there. I want to say it's still there on Carrollton, down by the river, down by Cold Stone, and like where Cooter Brown's is.
Yeah, on River Road.
How are we supporting a Games Workshop store? And if y'all don't know what Games Workshop is, they sell the most expensive tabletop game of all time, Warhammer. And like Warhammer 40K is like the most like if you're a fascist and you're into if you're a fascist, like to paint miniatures and do not like have time to have romantic relationships with anybody else, like Warhammer 40K,
by the way,
Warhammer 40K is your game.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. It's so weird.
We got to wrap it up.
Yeah, we got to wrap it up.
For the at least radio version, you were listening to Good Morning Comrade, WHIV LP New Orleans 102.3. We love you. Goodbye. As far as continuing the show, I don't know if you can hang up late for a little bit, but
I can hang out. It's gonna be much more live, so I'm gonna.
No. I was thinking about we can watch that Lindsay Ellis video about the ideology of the First Order and stuff.
Oh yes, do that. Fire that up.
You know watch that?
We got about I got a little bit before my mouth
gets let me turn it up.
All right.
I just had to end the show because
I understand how time works.
Yeah, it takes away. like Six said. But I thought this was a pretty good video. I think Lindsay's pretty cool. Even though they tried to cancel her a while back. I don't know.
Oh, this is at whatchamacallit. This is at Hollywood Studios.
Yeah. All right. Oh, you're okay. So we got Robert. We have Robert's attention.
I love that Disney. I'm trying to go to the Universal now, though. They got that Jurassic Park coaster, that Velocicoaster. I'm trying to holler at that.
Actually, Erin might like this video if she wants to hop on.
No, she doesn't. she doesn't like it as much as I do.
The rock and roller coaster is rocking. A sea of Mickey ears flows through the park.
Yeah.
That Beauty and the Beast live show is mysteriously still running. And it is here at Disney World's Hollywood Studios. Every hour on the hour, a cavalcade of stormtroopers begins its march down the...
All right.
So I'm okay, and I would say, because I said it sucks that like kids come dressed as these dudes because it's like a lack of parenting. Mm-hmm. But as far as theming goes, they should be there because the whole
that makes sense in terms of like, this is what we're doing right now. Right?
Well, that place tells us the whole idea. I don't know if she gets into this or what, but the whole idea is the land Batu, that's where you're supposed to be at, is occupied by the First Order.
Right.
So the rebellion has to be like, and it's like, that's why you can't like, you buy that $300 lightsaber and like, you can't, it literally costs $300. You
gotta fight them off.
And you're like, but no, they're like, oh, you can't have that out. You can't have that out because like the First Order will get you.
Yeah.
And there's literally a character. I can't think of her.
Okay, so hold on a second there. Like essentially what you're saying is that the rules of the park, like the actual legitimate IRL safety rules of the park are integrated with the essentially canon of Star Wars. That's pretty cool actually.
So like if you, for somebody who's been there, and there's a character, I can't think of her name, but she's like really cool. She's like this black, she's supposed to be a rebel spy. And she's like in like the book that explains everything about this land. So she's like this black lady with blue hair, and she literally sneaks around the land. She like hides behind garbage cans and and the stormtroopers see her and they chase her and all that kind of stuff. And like I tell you, like I came in my like I had like a whole X-Wing pilot like get up.
You came your X-Wing pilot get up? Seriously?
Well, no. So I had when I showed up there, I had the whole X-Wing pilot get up. And so like the dudes like are like, oh, you want to play? So they like get in your face. They're like, oh, let me see your identification. What are you doing here? Like that kind of thing. So it's supposed to be.
They're having a little extra fun with you, right?
Yeah. So they're like papers, please, because it's supposed to be an occupied territory.
Right.
With the rebel, they're searching for rebel like enclaves. So it's fine that they're there, but go on.
It's a beautiful day at Disney World's Hollywood Studios. The rock and roller coaster is rocking. A sea of Mickey ears flows through the park, and that Beauty and the Beast live show is mysteriously still running. And it is here at Disney World's Hollywood Studios. Every hour on the hour, a cavalcade stormtroopers begins its march down the centrally located Hollywood Boulevard. Led by Captain Phasma to the First Order march theme, while hundreds of onlookers take pictures.
More like Captain Phasma.
She says that's such a stupid character, but yeah.
And admire what the Walt Disney World website describes as a daunting demonstration.
Why is Captain Phasma stupid?
Because she like doesn't have like they got Gwendolyn Christie, who's like so striking, like physically and amazing. And like she never takes that helmet off in the whole movie, in any of the movies. It's like, what was the point of this?
Yeah, that is weird, right? Like,
it's so dumb.
The fact that they got her to do that job and like voice that character, but like that, you're right about that part. Like,
it's like what a waste. Like, how to throw money away.
She's a very striking human being, and the fact that you want to like put a fucking helmet over that or whatever is really
so
weird.
Goofy, dude.
I mean, maybe that's just thirsty Jeff talking, though.
She's so cool. I love Gwendolyn Christie.
Of the First Order's obedience and strength. Yikes. But for realsies, the March of the First Order is quite literally framed as a recruitment seminar. You know, for
recruiting fascists.
Kids. And it's moments like these when you stop and notice.
That's the problem, right there. That's the problem. The recruiting thing is problem. They should hate your kids. They should try to like bring fear and terror into your kids. Like And the guy who plays like, and like, if you ever get a chance, the guy who interacts interacts with Kylo Ren, like as Kylo Ren, like does not
in the movie.
He's not.
Or
No, in the park.
in the world.
Like in the park, like he does not like play that. Like I've watched videos of like people with their BB-8s like running next to him. He's like gently kicked them away. And then like, and there's like a guy.
That's very cool, by the way. There's
Yeah.
like bullying BB-8s is the coolest thing you could do.
And there's a guy like this one guy who he must be living his dream right now. He runs around as the like one of the officers, and his whole deal is to like at a kind of like a Renaissance festival. You can search him on YouTube as like, and his whole deal is to like interact with you. And so like he was one of the guys, like he's not trying to be like, oh, like he's like giving you the business, like the whole deal. And so like, yeah, so Aaron and I
carnival barker, right?
like, yeah, like Aaron and I were in the bar, like drinking our overpriced drinks out of like Jawa mugs or whatever. And he like comes over to me. He's like, you look like a smuggler. I need to like, should I run you in? And I'm like, oh, I'm just an honest trader trying to. He's like, I'm just an honest trader trying. I said, I'm just an honest trader trying to grab a drink and get off this rock and get on my business. He's like, oh, so you pledge your allegiance to the First Order then? I'm like, well, while you're standing in front of me, I sure do. And he's like, that's the correct answer. And he just storms off. No, he said something like, he's like, keep that attitude and you might live longer. I was like, this is why I paid $1,000 to be here.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Stormtrooper merchandise, both for sale and being worn around the park by adults and kids alike. And one has to wonder, how is it that we've arrived at a point where one of the...
Those hats are pretty fucking sick.
No,
I got a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Those are pretty sick hats.
Don't see. Look at you.
largest multimedia conglomerates in the world can create a show at one of the world's most popular theme parks that is, in effect, cosplay fascism.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are fascists, right? I mean, they look like fascists. They talk like fascists.
As the last day of the Republic!
I think he's supposed to be that guy.
He's what?
I think the guy I'm talking about is supposed to be that guy.
Okay.
Keep playing the video. I'm gonna try to find like a video.
Wait, actually, on second thought, do they? Does the First Order have any ideology? That's right. We're here to try to figure out the driving ideology of the First Order. I mean, what did you expect?
Mad respect to Lindsay lately, by the way. She's been under like super fire, and I think she's been like pretty cool. I don't know. I'm a Lindsay stan. If any of the haters are in chat right now, like just hit me. I don't give a shit. That's fine. Whatever.
I'm not saying putting space fascists on Rice Krispie treats is like bad or immoral. I'm just saying it's interesting how Disney has pushed their marketing of the dark side to be as evocative of real world fascist movements as possible, while not so evocative that
There's like a bunch of like Lindsay haters right now, right? Have you seen that
no,
shit?
No, I haven't.
Oh my god.
I'm
God
trying to
bless.
stay out of beef. That's Aaron's thing. It's like beef.
She got like mega canceled for oh god, why did she get canceled? For like having a weird take on, or for like having a negative take on, it wasn't Avatar: The Last Hand, but it was like Akiva or something, like something similar to Avatar: The Last Airbender, and she compared the two, and like there was a weird like, oh look at that, she's showing herself as a white woman, like that kind of thing.
Okay, that's weird.
Yeah, it was weird. She did a whole video on it, like addressing it and all that sort of stuff.
People are stupid, and I'm tired of their foolishness.
To what now?
Said people are dumb, and I'm tired of their foolishness.
Yeah, me too.
people start casting a side eye at putting stormtroopers on cuddly throws. But despite being fiction, the First Order is based, more than anything, on history's most famous group of fascists. And that kind of begs the question, can you import the aesthetics of fascism while kind of tabling fascist ideology so that you can sell Captain Phasma Christmas ornaments? I mean, the answer is obviously yes, but we're going to go ahead and make a thing out of it anyway.
Yeah, so the key sort of like tension that exists within this video is what you just sort of like articulated. Like essentially, how do you marketize fascism? How do you like process like fucking like fascist like imagery it's like into how do you monetize that?
You don't. You just no. You say they are bad. They are bad.
No.
You don't market it.
Yeah, you're so naive. You naive fool. How do you make money off of the fascism? Is the point? How do you make money off of this?
You sell things with them being like killed. I don't know.
No. Like she just mentioned the Captain
Based more than
Phasma
anything on history's most famous group, fascists. And that kind of begs the question, can you import the aesthetics of fascism while kind of tabling fascist ideology so that you can sell Captain Phasma Christmas ornaments? I mean, the answer is obviously
fascism
yes,
happens.
Anyway.
Fascism happens when nobody can afford your stormtrooper throw blanket. That's exactly right.
It's common knowledge that the Star Wars universe was based heavily on drawing from a 30-year cycle of nostalgia and had two heavily aesthetic influences pulled from that particular past. Spacey fantasy serials like Flash Gordon, which George Lucas originally wanted to adapt for film but couldn't obtain the rights for, and World War II imagery. But there is a tendency in nerd critical spaces for people to get kind of defensive when you start talking about the fact that Star Wars was a little extremely inspired by World War II, and this is known and has been known since it was incepted. But I look forward to an interesting and robust conversation in the comments below. Ring that bell so it'll do whatever it is that it's supposed to do. Like, share, and subscribe. Leave me a comment if you think that Kylo Ren is the sexiest space Nazi in the galaxy. I'm just kidding, I don't read the comments. If there is one aesthetic influence on the Empire, and by extension their descendants, the First Order, it was the Third Reich. This is a convenient visual shorthand, especially for audiences in the 70s, for whom the horrors of Nazi Germany were close enough that this was simple and effective, but not so recent that it's, too real. To quote the recently passed costume designer,
kind of a point on this is that, like, as time goes on, like the on the noseness of these comparisons or of these sort of like portrayals that have to happen in the movies are going to have to be a little bit more like ridiculous and on the nose, because the reality of like having experienced the actual sort of like imagery of fascism has gone away. The like invoking of them in film is going to have to be like more of a reach, if that makes any sense.
I mean, I
find it to be very interesting.
I always say, like, the reason why, like, my favorite genre of science fiction, cyberpunk, the reason why it's so hard to write a good cyberpunk story and the reason why the genre is dead is because we just live in that dystopia.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's...
Well, I don't think we necessarily live in fascism. We're closer to it than we were 60 years ago, perhaps. However, like the memory of like what the reality of fascism was at that time, whether or not we live in it now, like that could actually be like removed from the equation. Like invoking of that imagery needs to be a little bit more sort of like intentional, and like if you're trying to be like saying like this from a creative standpoint, from an artistic standpoint, you need to be more ham-handed about like saying this is fascism now than you needed to be 30 years ago, perhaps.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, because because it's fascism's baked in now. Like you say, we don't live in fascism, but like when you hear, we just had Donald Trump as president. Like how much of this is different than, the stuff he actually, Trump or the Republican Party says, I
only mean we don't live in fascism from the perspective of we don't live in something that we like explicitly call fascism, right? Like literally in Italy specifically and in Germany, but in Italy specifically they called it fascism. Okay, so like there is a difference from that perspective, but there's also a difference from the perspective of like what those movements stood for. However, and I'm like trying to be as precise as possible to sort of compare what the values of that society or the leadership of those societies were, and comparing it to now, and in doing that, like there is a lot of similarities, I guess you could say. That makes sense.
Yeah, I just think when I think we're saying two different things. When reality is so close to science fiction, when reality is so close to like what this thing, like Star Wars, for instance, like, you know, fascist Nazis bad, you know, rebels good, but when we're just inundated with it, it's just easy to be like, oh yeah, like I've heard this language before, therefore I will buy the stormtrooper fucking popsicle because it doesn't offend me. Because how could it be that bad when my own government says shit like, hey, refugees, like don't follow our, you know, our legal set practices for standards for immigration, because you know you can come here, you're supposed to be under the law, come here and try to get an asylum claim on, but I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to bypass all that and just tell you not to come, even though I'm like the second in command of this country. To sort of
like parlay this point, like to sort of like get to what we were saying earlier about Jedi or whatever, is like the only sort of legitimized alternative to the First Order or whatever is the Jedi Order, or at least was the Jedi Order, which is like again, like you mentioned earlier, a bunch of fucking live losers, right?
They absolutely are garbage.
So like we're sort of in this position.
I wouldn't let my kids role play as Jedis either. I'd be like, you're a fighter pilot. You can be a fighter pilot, or you could be a ground troop. That's what you can be.
Luke Skywalker sold out.
I guess. I mean, he did go back to Rogue Squadron, and like he was like the head of Rogue Squadron. He was like the commander of them. But so I will take offense to that.
All right, let's continue though. But I think this sort of like I do think that this is a sort of productive,
absolutely,
direction for conversation, I guess you could say.
70s, for whom the horrors of Nazi Germany were close enough that this was simple and effective, but not so recent that it's, you know, too real. To quote the recently passed costume designer for the original Star Wars trilogy, John Mollo, Lucas wanted the Imperial people to look efficient, totalitarian, fascist, and the rebels, the goodies, to look something out of a Western or the U.S. Marines. He said, "You've got a very difficult job here because I don't want anyone
to look American, honestly. He wanted them to look, he wanted Han Solo, for example, to look like an American fucking outlaw.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was trying to do a spaghetti western in
familiar,
space.
But
which is, by the way, nothing wrong with that.
No, that's when Star Wars is its best. Star Wars, the things that matter in Star Wars: fighter pilot shit, cowboy shit. Nothing else matters.
All the ideology is actually pretty garbage.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna BRB. I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
All right, go right ahead.
And the rebels, the goodies, to look something out of a Western or the U.S. Marines. He said, "You've got a very difficult job here because I don't want anyone to notice the costumes. They've got to look familiar, but not familiar at the same time. But in general, the Nazi aesthetic, from the uniform tailoring to the color schemes to the headgear, seems pretty obvious as a source of inspiration. It's even there in the way the actors playing the Empire characters approached their roles. To quote actor Kenneth Colley, who played Admiral Pete in the original trilogy, obviously they were going on some sort of design for Darth Vader's men. There were echoes of the Gestapo, or at least fascism in there, and that was how I approached the role." And this doesn't even begin to dive into George Lucas's thoughts when it comes to the prequels, where he describes the rise of the Emperor in Revenge of the Sith as, "How do you turn over democracy to a tyrant with applause? Not with a coup, but with applause. That is the story of Caesar, Napoleon, and Hitler." So, deliberate reference to fascist iconography is there in all Star Wars movies. But if we're talking about the prevalence of Nazi imagery in popular culture, guess we need to talk about our girl.
Turn down for what?
Wait, no. No, you're a fucking fascist. You don't deserve to turn down for what?
Look at this photograph.
I don't even know who that is. Who that?
Hard to talk about the history of film, let alone the Star Wars franchise, without eventually discussing the work of director Leni Riefenstahl, whose most notable works were her propaganda films made in celebration of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, Triumph of the Will.
She made Triumph of the Will?
Writer
Oh, yeah, what a piece of shit.
Montag once wrote that Riefenstahl is the only major artist who was completely identified with the Nazi era and whose work, not only during the Third Reich but 30 years after its fall, has consistently illustrated some of the themes of fascist aesthetics. And while the topic of Leni Riefenstahl and the impact of her work could easily fill a much longer video than this, we are keeping it simple. For more on Riefenstahl's influence on Triumph of the Will, see Dan Olson's video on the same subject. Suffice to say that, aside from the whole Nazi propaganda thing, Leni Riefenstahl is notable for
debatably
pioneering filming techniques, editing, and striking sweeping shots, in particular for...
Dude, Leni Riefenstahl videos, like in terms of like fascist propaganda, are fucking eye-opening.
This is completely new to me. I had no
You've
idea.
never seen this?
I mean, I've seen Triumph of the Will, but I didn't know it was even a woman. I had no idea who this person is, except now I know massive piece of shit.
Oh my god. Like literally doing fascist propaganda, right?
Yeah, terrible.
Incredible. It's like it's
Garbage.
shocking. It's shocking to like figure this stuff out and like see it for the first time.
production.
Start to like rock your Monday night there, Chief. You weren't ready.
Yeah. You good?
I love you, brother.
Damn, dude.
Film. But more relevant here is the iconography she developed to show the power of the Reich that influences depictions of Nazis and fascists to this day. The iconography that we associate with Nazis isn't from historical documents or from, non-Nazi historians. It's from Nazi.
Dude, Torches and Pitchforks, the rabbit hole is so deep you don't even fucking know. You have no idea.
That's wild.
Propaganda, specifically this Nazi propaganda, and that is Leni Riefenstahl's legacy. So when we see the aesthetics of the Empire and the First Order, they aren't inspired by the Third Reich, but by Nazi propaganda about the Third Reich. So
It's like
the
meta
Cold War.
propaganda.
Leni Riefenstahl's been acquitted of any war crimes, despite her films value to the Nazi Party and propaganda and her friendship with Hitler and Goebbels. This narrative of Leni Riefenstahl as an auteur who just, happened to make films for a monstrous regime emerges, and a renewed international interest in her work accompanies it and reaches a whole new generation of film directors. Ahem. So you see these shots of marching soldiers, the way villains are filmed from slightly below, and this very direct call to a shot in Triumph of the Will, and
Yeah, Leni Riefenstahl. Yeah, that's her name.
the influence is surprisingly overt. So this isn't oops, accidental Nazis. The call to fascist iconography
Oops, all Nazis.
is in all three trilogies.
But here's the thing about fascism. It usually rises for a reason. Never a good reason, but there's always a call to arms, if you will, an ideology.
If we're going to try to discern the ideology of the First Order, it's only fair that we do the same for the Empire. So what did the Empire actually stand for in the original trilogy, if anything? Well, the original trilogy never dives too deeply into it, and both the good guys and the bad guys play into
Yeah, the
larger,
early movies
non-specific tropes.
really are ideologically like empty and are like primarily image based, which by the way, imagery over any kind of ideology is kind of fresh. Just to throw that out there too.
Sure, that's because that wasn't the movie that
wasn't
Lucas
the
was trying
idea.
to
It wasn't
make.
the point.
Lucas was trying to make a space opera, and it just turned,
Yeah. Well, I guess my point here is to say that like when you have when you have an aesthetic with nothing to fill it, the thing that will most likely fill it would be fascism.
All right, but I guess I'm just saying that like Lucas later made the movies political, even if
No. I'm
Yeah.
definitely not trying to say that Lucas is a fascist.
Oh, okay.
Lib.
He's a lot of dumb things. Like he's a guy that got lucky. His movie was
he's a
saved
lib.
in editing.
He's a lib.
He's not that great of a director. But fascist is not something I would.
No. But it's very easy to fill an empty. And this is kind of like one of the broad points of this video. It's very easy to fill a image based sort of like charisma based movement with no substance and make that into fascism, as opposed to like something that's a little more fundamental. Which, by the way, like when you're trying to create a villain, you can't do worse than that. Honestly,
Sure.
Like when you want to make your villain fucking fascist. That's a good way to do it. The villain.
No, 100%. I think of one of the best video games of all time, like Wolfenstein, where it's just like, you know, John Romero was just like, not John, but John Carmack was just like, well, how can we make the body count super high in this game and have nobody get pissed off? And it's like, I know, let's make them Nazis.
Yeah,
even though they didn't create Wolfenstein, that was an already established game that they made a sequel.
But honestly,
before all the nerds try to kill me.
From a propaganda perspective, that's great, because you know what? Me personally, and most of the people that come from an ideological perspective that I come from, hate Nazis and think that killing Nazis, at least in a video game, is good.
Shit, killing them in real life is good. Fuck that.
In a video game,
no,
in real life,
bro. If I can't kill it, if we're gonna fucking live in a world where I'm gonna get banned off of, I'm sorry. I mean, you get. This is what, live on Twitch, where like, oh,
Minecraft,
not killing Nazis in fucking Minecraft is bad. Like, I'm sorry. Then we've really like fallen down the shithole. Sorry.
In a video game.
Like both my grandparents like murdered these fuckers, so it's good enough for them. It's good enough for me.
Well, that was real.
They could fuck off. Yeah.
I don't like Nazis. I'll be honest with that.
And demonstrating their moral alignment, i.e., the flippant genocide of all of Alderaan by the Death Star. The Empire had no real conclusive ideology behind their regime in the original trilogy.
Now you see that evil will always triumph. Because
classic movie, by the way.
Goddamn great movie.
Spaceballs is like super underrated. I think.
Good. No, it's not underrated. People love that movie.
Buddy, do you know anybody in 2021 that knows Spaceballs?
Me? A lot of people.
I don't know, man. I think I'm concerned that the Mel Brooks canon is being lost upon our youth, or our
No, that's like such a boomer meme. Like, Blazing Saddles couldn't be made today because
no, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that it could.
I know that's not what you're saying, but I'm like,
no.
What I'm saying is Mel Brooks is like, his shit is not forgotten.
No. That actually, I'm actually making the opposite point. I'm saying that because of the idea that a Mel Brooks movie like Blazing Saddles feels, at least to a lot of like normies, to be out of the mainstream, might be a reason that mainstream nerds wouldn't want to introduce it. However, there is like Mel Brooks movies are, and actually, funny enough, Lindsay has another video on specifically Mel Brooks and the producers and shit. But essentially, the movies that Mel Brooks did were so subversive from a perspective of like from the oppressed in a lot of ways, like specifically when it came to producers, like literally the whole point of the producers was, hey, I'm a Jew who's gonna write a movie or a screenplay about, you know, a couple of people that want to produce a play about people that want to do Springtime for Hitler to make them to play to shut down on the first night and shit like that. Like, it is crazy how subversive that is. It is like 7 or 8 levels of fucking satire that, like, I'm like, my argument with this is that, like, not that that they can't make a movie like this anymore because it would get canceled. My argument is they can't make a movie like even Spaceballs anymore because it's not smart, like, because the culture is not smart enough for that, if that makes any kind of sense.
I guess I never thought of Spaceballs as like a smart movie.
It's a very smart movie, but
we get a lot of good puns.
Yeah.
Druish princesses.
Yeah. I think it was probably one of the lazier efforts of Mel Brooks.
All right. I get
to be clear. Like
All right,
compared to
fair
like
enough, fair
the
enough.
history of the world, or like or
Frankenstein and
producers,
shit.
or like high anxiety, even. Like I think that's like one of the lowest efforts, but also one of the highest. Like if he didn't do that, it would not
Yeah, I
try to
agree with
do
you
it.
there. I really agree. It's the gateway into Mel Brooks things. I
That's
absolutely agree with you.
right? It's very easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, Perry Air. The movie was so good. The Spaceballs is great, by the way.
So good, dude.
And part of this is because they don't need to. It has to do with where we enter the story. And this is one strike.
Like Mel Brooks is a literal genius. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna like go on about it. But like Mel Brooks is a genius.
It is a lazy movie, though. Now that I think
That
about it,
particular
I still
movie might
love
be
it.
like lazy by his standards, but like
Yeah.
I love Mel Brooks.
It has a lot of dated references.
Yeah.
It's like it's very. If I was gonna say something about it, it's very DreamWorks-esque. Like as far as DreamWorks like shitty animated movies that have all these
proto DreamWorks.
proto like Shrek singing "Hey, now you're an all-star" type shit.
I get it.
Like a bunch of shitty references that are going to be terrible. Like people are going to like, what the fuck is this? Like, 2 years later.
So just to sort of like continue pursuing down this line, because we're streaming, we're vibing.
Sure.
Just to pursue down this line a little bit further. There is sort of a break between sort of the like quote unquote like serious Mel Brooks and like the more sort of like very, very silly Mel Brooks as well, right?
Okay.
So like probably after movies like High Anxiety or things like that, like I wouldn't call them particularly serious. They're comedies. Every Mel Brooks movie is a comedy. However, like after that, like the movies became more directly satire. So like Spaceballs, Robin Hood Men in Tights, movies like that became more sort of like intentionally like, this is a send up of the thing. Hi, Aaron.
There she goes.
Does that make sense? Am I making sense here?
Honestly, not really.
I'm not making sense.
I'm trying to follow you. It's probably just me.
So I guess the point is that like when it comes to Spaceballs, like that is very specifically a send up of Star Wars, right? Yeah. When it comes to Robin Hood Men in Tights, that is very specifically.
Oh God, forgot about that movie completely.
Beg your pardon?
Forgot about that movie completely.
Yeah, that is a very specifically a send up of the Robin Hood movies. Like and so like there was a point sort of like in the later career, I suppose you could say, of Mel Brooks where those movies became that kind of satire, which did not exist prior to. I mean, I guess High Anxiety was kind of a Hitchhiker send up, I guess, but not in the same way. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe I'm making an arbitrary distinction.
You're saying movies like I think I agree with you. Like movies like Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, Blazing Saddles.
Even Young Frankenstein.
I mean, that's a satire as well.
Yeah, but it still was its own thing. It still wasn't confined. It felt like it wasn't too confined by the property that it's trying to lampoon.
Yeah, I think
it didn't have to hit a bunch of beats.
I think when you first start to hit that limit, if you want to like get into the nerd shit, like the first part where you sort of like hit up upon that limit is Spaceballs.
Yeah,
which is probably the most limiting of the Star Wars. I mean, of the Mel Brooks movie, I could say. By the way, underrated is the History of the World movies. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they're so fucking funny.
I have not.
I mean, if you ever want to see somebody sing a song about the Spanish Inquisition, there you go.
I think I have seen that. Or maybe in my brain, I'm getting it confused with The Man from La Mancha.
From what?
The Man from La Mancha, the Don Quixote musical. I am the Lord of La Mancha.
I am Don Quixote, the Lord of La Mancha.
That's one of the 5 musicals I can deal with.
You're thinking about The Man of La Mancha. Oh God, what's his fucking name?
I don't know.
Kimberly. What? Man of La Mancha. Who's
His name is Sancho Panza.
Who's the lead in Man of La Mancha? The actor.
Who's Don Quixote?
A lot of people.
The most famous one.
Well, no, I mean the one
No, in the musical with Sophia Loren.
Robert Goulet.
Thank you.
Kimberly's also bringing up the point where Sam Beckett from Quantum Leap did that number.
I will never be so hard up to watch Quantum Leap.
Aaron, hello. Aaron.
That's Doctor Who territory.
Kimberly loves Quantum Leap.
Yeah,
Kimberly is a Quantum Leap lover. Anyway, let's continue the video. Kimberly is very defensive of Quantum Leap.
Why? It seems like the most boring show of all time.
Had no real conclusive ideology behind their regime in the original trilogy.
Now you see that evil will always triumph because good is dumb.
And part of this is because they don't need to. It has to do with where we enter the story, and this is one strength the original trilogy has. And yes, actually, even the prequels.
I'm a person, and my name is Anakin.
Bear with me. When we
I'm a slave. I'm a slave that's forced to fucking win a dangerous motorcycle race for my own freedom where these assholes could just free me.
It's just such bad acting for this kid.
first meet
Poor kid. Did you know that kid got bullied? Fucking like he just grew up to be like this kind of like pudgy kid, and he just got bullied mercilessly. And like,
I feel awful for
he
him.
was like, yeah, like on the brink of like killing himself because they were just like, oh yeah, what are you gonna do? Force push us? You fucking nerd. Yes, pretty bad.
Skywalker and Princess Leia, we are entering a universe where the Empire is not only in power, it is the only power. They've been in power since before Luke was born, and this is the only power structure young Luke has ever known, and therefore the only one we, the audience, know. Moreover, the story starts on Tatooine, a shithole of a planet that nobody cares about.
Everything happens on Tatooine.
Everything.
I have no need for a protocol droid. Of course you haven't, sir. Not in an environment such as this.
Day-to-day life is kind of impacted. Luke understands that the Empire is unjust, but it's not the worst ever. You know, the Empire more or less leaves
Which,
people
by the
alone.
way, is like most people feel like a very similar way about like the fucking horrors in our own society.
Yep,
So it's
yep,
actually pretty
yep.
relatable.
Unless they rabble-rouse, you know, like most totalitarian states in peacetime. Luke isn't really even keen on joining the rebellion until his family gets torched. Meanwhile, with the prequels, again, hot mess though they are, the power structure in place does make sense, kind of. And though it requires an absurd level of 13-dimensional chess on the part of Palpatine, it's clear what the power structure is, what it stands
Josh
for,
Hawley?
and
You
how
mean
the
Josh
Senate
Hawley?
is
You
duped
mean
by...
Josh Hawley?
I don't know.
Who's
I
Matt
don't know.
Hawley? I think that's what I mean.
by fear into giving themselves over to fascism, as evidenced by the one good line in all three movies.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
Palpatine manufactured a crisis, exploited fear, somebody burned down the Reichstag, and wouldn't you know it?
Told me I was furious.
But in the new trilogy, we have the First Order fighting against the Resistance, who is being backed by the semi-neutral New Republic, a confusing mess of a power structure that itself gets blown up halfway through The Force Awakens, before we even meet them or know who they are. Anyway, a similar plot point to the destruction of the New Republic happens in A New Hope. Grand Moff Tarkin orders the destruction of a planet that we've never seen or been to. But it works more effectively in A New Hope for one simple reason. It's Leia's home planet, and she make a sad face. Secondly, it's clear why the Empire destroys Alderaan. Leia is becoming a figurehead in this nascent rebellion, and it's her home planet. Moreover, this is a common tactic in totalitarian states. Big displays of force to keep the...
Yeah, look, we all get our fascists confused there.
Here's the thing, and it's like kind of a segue, but what pisses me so much about the First Order is that because they're just like, well, people know the Empire, so let's just make something just like the Empire. Where like if you read the Star Wars extended universe, the Empire is so much more interesting because what happens is, okay, so take the TIE fighter for instance, the twin ion fighter. It has no shielding, but it has superior turn radius and mobility because they weren't worried about shielding. They were like, we're the Empire, we'll just mass produce these fucking things. We've got the manpower, we've got the raw material, we're literally like mining it out of the ground with slave labor. Now, what happens after the Empire falls, the Empire now becomes the Mujahideen. They become the guerrilla fighters. And the New Republic is now the legitimate government. Mandalorian goes into this actually. It's really well because it's like fighter pilots who are just like, oh man, remember when we were the fucking rebellion? Now I just print off TPS reports all goddamn day. But so now the Empire has to be like, now they have to worry about manpower and they have to worry about, material. So they design ships, they design the new TIE fighters to have shielding, and they train their pilots a lot better and shit like that, how to like survive instead of like dying for the glory of the Empire. It's actually super interesting, but they're just like, Disney was just like, oh, just do another Empire. Just do a thing like,
right.
All right.
So
people can't understand nuance. People can't understand nuance because we're
development, basic development, like logical development, honestly. All right.
We're just bad at nuance.
Vulcan line. The Republic in The Force Awakens, yes, there was a deleted scene where they sent a character we know there, but it was deleted. And either way, none of the main characters have any connection to the Hosnian system. Point is, from a narrative standpoint, the ideology of the First Order and why they do what they do matters more in The Force Awakens because the First Order isn't really in power yet. They're more of a rogue state, and therefore their task is to rally people to their side with rhetoric or invade
That
Poland,
is a cool
but
dynamic
they
of
don't.
that movie.
Apparently, they just
that is a cool dynamic of that movie. Is that the First Order doesn't start off in power?
That's what I'm talking. Yeah, so that's like they tried to, but they don't look ragtag. They look look how organized. Look how organized they look.
They're so.
You know what I mean? Like in the like I said again in the Star Wars books, they're ISIS. They're not this. They're not a state.
I will say in terms of like on state level, like takeover. That level of organization, especially if you're going to be doing it from a fash perspective, does make sense. However, like, I understand what you're saying, that there's no sort of development to that point. Right. It's almost like that point sort of self-develops. There's no.
They self-develops. They just cram it down your throat, like.
Right. No, that's what I mean. Like fascism just happens. It doesn't start from anywhere. It just sort of like it's there or it's not, as opposed to the conditions that create it, which is like one of the laziness points of like the movies, right?
Super lazy.
Yeah. Okay. I think we agree.
We agree.
Power yet. They're more of a rogue state, and therefore their task is to rally people to their side with rhetoric or invade Poland. But they don't. Apparently, they just steal babies and raise them under totalitarianism. But don't worry, these kidnapped babies shake their conditioning pretty quickly.
Hey, Finn, huh? Finn, I'm gonna call you Finn. Is that all right? Finn. Yeah. Finn, I like that.
My point is, the new trilogy incorporates a lot of stuff that is evocative of real-world atrocities. Without really thinking through the implications of these inclusions or the real-world connotations.
They don't destroy the New Republic as a means of maintaining control. It's more of a we demand to be taken seriously, one that creates a power vacuum that they have ostensibly exploited and filmed by the time of The Last Jedi. I guess it's not really clear who is.
Audio. It's just me now.
Whole lot of sense in The Force Awakens, which itself has a bad habit of aping plot points from A New Hope without importing that all-important context. The Empire was in total control and keeping the rabble-rousers in line. The First Order is a rogue state who demands to be taken seriously. But let's take for granted that this is all deliberate. There are two things that The Last Jedi introduced which kind of begs one to consider the mechanics of the universe. A, war profiteering.
There's only one business in the galaxy that'll get you this rich.
War.
Selling weapons to the First Order.
B, an implied caste system with exploited labor, namely child labor, at the bottom. So it's clear what our heroes are fighting for, but if the light rises, so too must the dark. In other words, what is the First Order fighting for? Besides... Fascism has always been difficult to define as an ideology compared to, say, Nazism, itself a form of fascism. Ask the average person to define fascism, and they probably will not do it accurately. Yet we still love using fascist as an insult. People don't really know what fascism is, but they know what it looks like, or is imagined to look like, thanks in part to movies like Star Wars. Umberto Eco's 1995 essay, Ur-Fascism, which you should go read right now, perhaps captures the elusive nature of fascism the most succinctly. According to Eco, the fascist game can be played in many forms, and the name of the game does not change. Fascism does not belong to one nationality, nor religion, nor period of time. However, Eco does outline 14 bullet points in defining fascism. I'm not going to list all of them, but stick to the ones which are relevant with regard to the first order. An emphasis on, read, cult of tradition, exploiting a natural fear of difference. Disagreement is a sign of diversity, and diversity
Actually, I think Echoes.
in his impact
Oops. I'm
of
sorry.
the self, which put
I think Echoes sort of like at least attempt at defining fascism is helpful. Does that make any sense?
puts him somewhat at odds with real-world fascists. Words, what is the first order fighting for?
Sorry, I like
Eco's
clicked-
1995
I
essay, Ur-Fascism, which you should go read right now, perhaps captures the elusive nature of fascism the most succinctly. According to Eco, the fascist game can be played in many forms, and the name of the game does not change. Fascism does not belong to one nationality, nor religion, nor period of time. However, Eco does outline 14 bullet points in defining fascism. I'm not going to list all of them, but stick to the ones which are relevant with regard to the first order.
Also like one thing that frustrates me when it comes to the use of Echo's points is that if somebody like identifies one particular point, they will pigeonhole it as fascism when it becomes sort of like there's not like a defined thing. So like I'm very, very sort of like careful when I apply this because I think Echo did good work.
Mhm.
And at the same time, like I don't want to over apply the meaning of fascism to the point where it doesn't mean anything at all anymore. So like I don't know. Maybe we need to go through that on the show,
emphasis-
like specifically.
Emphasis on, read, cult of tradition, exploiting a natural fear of difference. Disagreement is a sign of diversity, and diversity bad. There is no struggle for life, but rather life is lived for struggle. And in such a perspective, everyone is educated to become a hero. In every mythology, the hero is an exceptional being, but in Ur-Fascist ideology, heroism is the norm. This cult of heroism is strictly linked with the cult of death. So, on second thought, maybe this indefinable, fluid ideology of the First Order speaks to it being fascist, in spite of the fact that we literally know nothing about what it is the First Order actually wants. You know, besides. Oh, Kylo Ren, you quilt of rage, you amalgam of every bad boy cliche, all wrapped in a selfish ideology and scaffolded by space fascists. Save him, Rey. You know you want to.
It isn't too late.
Save him. So Kylo Ren is the epitome of everything that is fascist but fanficky about the First Order. Kylo does not have an ideology outside of the ideology of the self, which puts him somewhat at odds
Kylo
with
Ren's a really interesting character, I think, because he's like
He's cool. He's the only thing good about the whole.
I think he's like very, 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 very sort of like self-interested more than anybody else. He's kind of a libertarian, right?
I wouldn't even call him that. I'd call him just a damaged child. Again,
that makes sense.
Again, he's what happens when like weak and effectual liberals like don't want to like have an ideology and like work towards the ideology. Just think everything's gonna just like work out.
Yeah, it's like he's a victim of a fatalist like pie in like liberals sort of like think that things will work out like you just.
I mean, it's the same thing with Anakin. Like it's Darth Vader. It's a case study in like how to create a school shooter.
Yeah,
like
actually that makes perfect sense. The biggest comparison across like all of the movies, which is kind of weird.
Like the Jedi fucking up children. That's the main. The Jedi will take your kid and they will fuck them up.
Like Kylo Ren and Anakin Skywalker are the exact same character in a lot of ways.
Right.
Yeah, that makes
it's
sense.
like it's. Oh, you take this kid whose mom was like he was born into slavery, and then you like separate him from his mother and like keep him a slave, and then don't use your power to stop her from like getting gang raped and murdered, and then you tell him like, oh, now you're in this creepy, weird religious cult, and oh, by the way, you can't fuck. And then you're like, oh, why is this kid so angry all the time?
Yeah.
Why is the dark side so strong in him? You fucking put that in him, you weird fucks. So yeah, Jedis are the problem.
You can't have a cult of heroism if you don't particularly care about being a hero.
If you've ever run into any identitarian,
Her shirt rules,
may
by the
know-
way. Her shirt's fucking rules.
That looks like Galaxy's Edge exclusive there.
The what?
That looks like a Galaxy's Edge exclusive.
Maybe it is.
note that when they do tend to fall to the dark side, they also tend to adhere to a certain set of ideologies, usually having to do with race, nationality, protecting the people from some amorphous foreign threat, and white women being obedient broodmares. But all it really does is give a sense of purpose to this sort of amorphous rage felt by the fascist, which the fascist power structure can now exploit. The relationship between Snoke and Kylo Ren actually illustrates this really well. This is also why Kylo Ren disposes of Snoke so easily. His ideology doesn't matter. So obviously the First Order doesn't need to mirror real-world fascists in order to have their own brand of fictional fascism. Maybe instead of the cultural Marxists masterminding multiculturalism, they're scapegoating aliens or something. Those goddamn Wookiees are taking our jobs.
No, they do that. They literally do that.
Real
Say
or
again?
They literally do that in Star Wars. That's like a trope.
What, the Wookiees are like?
Not the Wookiees in general, but when we talked about like speciesism, like racism, like that's their big sin. Is that they think like the unpure races. It's Nazism. They think like the lower races are like ruining the galaxy, and they're only there to be subjugated.
Mm-hmm. That's as American as apple pie, Chief.
Yep. Oh my God.
imagined is integral for the rise of fascist power structures.
That undercurrent is there in some of the extended universe books, particularly the original Thrawn trilogy.
Hey, yep.
They're no longer considered canon, and that still doesn't shed any light on what the
Erased.
First Order wants or believes. The closest in this new canon we've seen to actually exploring the ideology of the First Order was the book Bloodline by Claudia Gray, wherein the divide in the new liberal republic is between the populists and the centrists. And in the Star Wars universe, those words do not mean at all what they mean in our universe, so this gets really confusing.
The pre-First Order political divide in the Star Wars universe is more akin to the political divide between Alexander Hamilton's Federalists and Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republicans, with Princess Leia on the Jeffersonian side as a populist. Again, this term does not mean what it means
Love that you have a princess as a populist. That's pretty cool.
on the Jeffersonian side as a populist. Again, this term does not mean what it means in our political discourse, and it's really confusing. And with her on-again, off-again rival, Ransom Casterfo, on the Hamiltonian side as a centrist who wants a stronger central government. I wish they had chosen different names. The populists are more like a states' rights crowd. They want the planets to be more autonomous, and the centrists favor a stronger central government. And no one realizes that a fair chunk of the Hamiltonian centrists are actually closet fascists. And like with the prequels, there is some mundane conflict that the fascists can exploit in order to consolidate power. The point I'm making here is that it is actually kind of difficult to demonstrate how fascist ideologies gain traction in society and fiction. But with all that said, we don't learn a whole lot about their ideology other than the typical Star Wars powers for power's sake and, hate and dark side and all that. In part because said ideology could be #too real and read as flippant or offensive, but also because the underlying ideology is never logical. Revenge of the Sith actually demonstrates that really well. So if you're going to try and make like pajamas and plush toys out of your space fascists, it does make sense that you'd probably just want to skip all that and just get right to the totalitarianism part. So let's go.
So that's the important point, right? Like, how do you sell this shit?
Right.
Right? Like how do you can't, if you're gonna sell fascism as an aesthetic, then like you can't just say like buy fascism. You need to sell the aesthetic while burying the fascism.
Or you just don't sell it. How about let's don't?
Well, I mean,
Let's not do that.
You're saying that we shouldn't or shouldn't do something in a moral sense, which I agree with to a very big extent. But like people like Disney or whatever, it like is doing this. So like,
well, we could just
how could you receive that in a certain sense? You know what I mean? Like they're the point where they're the producers of culture. You know what I mean?
Ooh, that's a stretch. But as much as I love Disney, I do like Disney things. I wouldn't call them producers of culture.
Let's just circle back a little bit.
I think I know what you meant, but that's a stretch.
I mean, they have more of an influence over culture more than any individual. They have a very significant influence over culture. Would you not agree? Disney
influence?
Yeah.
I guess we'd have to define culture. Like, what is culture? Like
they're responsible to culture in a very specific sense, but they're also like pushing the same culture in this specific direction. Like they're not necessarily in a position where they wouldn't provide any kind of friction.
I don't think that's what I'm that's what I'm saying. They're not, they're just going with the flow. They're just seeing where the tea leaves are. They're just reading tea leaves and then reacting to the tea leaves.
Okay.
They don't love queer people because they love queer people. They love queer people because queer people on their own created a gay day.
Yeah.
And they all decided, and then somebody said, we can make some money from this.
Well, that's the sort of like fundamental point of capitalism in a sense, right? Like the whole point of it is to get what you can, and like morals. And I'm not like one to make moral arguments, to be clear. Like morals and also material arguments of the broader like group of people, like the broader like populace, are subverted essentially.
Yeah, sure. I get that.
Be hashtag too real and read as flippant or offensive, but also because the underlying ideology is never logical. Revenge of the Sith actually demonstrates that really well. So if you're going to try and make like pajamas and plush toys out of your space fascists, it does make sense that you'd probably just want to skip all that and just get right to the totalitarianism part.
So let's go back to Kylo Ren. What was it about the ideology of the First Order that appeals to him? Was he worried about alien multiculturalism leading to the eventual demise of the human race? No, he's disappointed in his father and his father figure. I guess
personalizing systemic problems, right? Individualizing social broad like issues and making them like individualizing them. It's sort of like the romantic sort of point of a lot of this shit, from not just from like one of the things that I like about the Song of Fire and Ice, the Game of Thrones movies and stories or whatever. I read the books more than I watched the shows.
Okay.
Was that like there were moral or like personal motivations for things, but the decisions that people made were material, right? They were based off of what would benefit them in the moment. And when they didn't act on what would benefit them in the moment, they were punished for that in a sort of moral sense. This sort of like works out its way through more of like an individual moral lens, I find. In a different way. I don't know. Yeah, thought on that?
Not really. To be honest. Like, no.
Okay.
I don't know. I got kind of different things out of Game of Thrones than that.
What'd you get out of Game of Thrones?
Just like how politics is just war by other means.
Yeah, totally.
That's all.
All right, well, let's continue.
Luke made a boo-boo and thought about killing him for a second, but Kylo Ren didn't join the fascist because he was seduced by fascist ideology. Kylo Ren is a fascist figurehead out of spite.
The supreme leader is dead.
He's a LARPer.
The Last Jedi shows that Kylo Ren doesn't really care about enriching any side, other than whatever side will best empower him, which goes to show that he has no ideology to defend, because he doesn't care, and possibly because there is no ideology to defend. I think this also speaks to some of the disappointment with Snoke. The Emperor was good at stoking fear and exploiting it, a common authoritarian tactic, but Snoke? What does he even want?
The Supreme Leader is wise.
Snoke is using you for your power. The seed of the Jedi Order lives. As long as it does, hope lives.
In the end, Kylo Ren is willing to dispatch with his old master, basically on a whim, because Snoke's ideology is not worth fighting for, because it doesn't exist. Routing around back to Umberto Eco, one concept of fascism is that it idealizes this concept of some savior, or what Eco refers to as the Ur-fascist hero. Says Eco, in non-fascist societies, the lay public is told that death is unpleasant, must be faced with dignity. Believers are told that it is the painful way to reach a supernatural happiness. By contrast, the Ur-fascist hero craves heroic death, advertised as the best reward for a heroic life. The Ur-fascist hero is impatient to die. In his impatience, he more frequently sends other people to death. Since permanent war and heroism are difficult games to play, the Ur-fascist transfer his will to power to sexual matters. This is the origin of machismo, which implies both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality. Since even sex is a difficult game to play, the Ur-fascist hero tends to play with weapons. Doing so becomes an ersatz phallic exercise. So, before Luke's oopsie daisy, Kylo Ren is essentially the proto-fascist clay, the raw anger and resentment before it has been given a target. This is all part and parcel with the actual narrative trajectory of the trilogy, where Ben is savable in part because he lacks ideology. However, even in that, he still embodies Eco's description of Ur-fascism as a non-ideology of action.
What? You still there?
Is that it would be t-shirts. Or, and I'm about to give Disney way too much credit, there could be a deeper understanding at play that the ideology doesn't actually matter. And that's kind of the point. Perhaps the error is in trying to apply
so this is actually the most interesting point of the video, where she basically says that, like, all of the things that, like, are presented as ideological are basically purely aesthetic. Like, that's what is being used to sell, like, all the merch, right?
Right.
Logic to an non-logical ideology. Again, according to Eco, Nazism had a really clear-cut ideology, but concurrent Italian fascism under Mussolini did not. And the First Order also borrows heavily from those aesthetics. In Eco's words, contrary to common opinion, fascism in Italy had no special philosophy. Mussolini did not have any philosophy, he only had rhetoric. In his early anti-clerical years, according to a likely legend, he once asked God, in order to prove his existence, to strike him down on the spot. Later, Mussolini always cited the name of God in his speeches, and did not mind being called the Man of Providence. So on the one hand, it's not unfair to point out that with fascism, ideology is only a means to an end, and the end is the quashing of dissent, stamping out diversity, heroes and heroic death, and strict totalitarianism. Star Wars has always understood that much. Bad guys employing horrible acts we see mirrored in the real world, but shifting them just far enough from real-world atrocities that we can merchandise the villains almost as much as we merchandise the heroes. We see this in the likes of Thanos as well. He's a genocidal monster, sure, but, you know, at least he goes by random coin toss for who he kills. Some of the time. See, he doesn't target specific ethnic groups like real genociders do. He's an egalitarian genocidal monster. He's complex. To quote Eco again, nevertheless, historical priority does not seem to me a sufficient reason to explain why the word fascism became a synecdoche, that is, a word that could be used for different totalitarian movements. This is not because fascism contained in itself, so to speak in their quintessential state, all the elements of any later form of totalitarianism. On the contrary, fascism had no quintessence. Fascism was a fuzzy totalitarianism, a collage of different philosophical and political ideas, a beehive of contradictions. So it could be that they're being lazy and playing it safe so they can sell more stuff, but who knows, maybe deep down, Disney understands this. And that's what makes this family-friendly type of fascism so easy to brand and to sell.
That's pretty interesting. I get people are mad at her about this old ass video, are they? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, the marketability of fascism is really interesting to me, because, like, if there is something that is marketable anywhere ever in the world in any capacity, capitalists will market it and sell it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which speaks to the agreement between capitalism and fascism. Like, there's just a confluence there, right? And it's not something to like be particularly alarmed about. It's just like a dynamic to be understandable, or at least to understand. Like that, I'm not trying to say like libs are fascists, if that makes any sense. Despite the fact that like there are transitional pathways from liberalism to fascism, right?
Right.
Based off of what we're talking about here. I don't know. There's a little bit more here.
Oh, who cares? Part of the problem with applying even a very modest set of academic theory to a pop culture thing is then we get some hand-wringing over the inevitable moralizing, and it also begs the question, well, what do you want me to do about it? Not own Darth Vader pajamas? When that is not the point. The point is to examine the context of the thing, not demand that Disney make their villains less fashy. Fictional villains always draw inspiration from real-world bad things, and that's fine. That said, I do think it's worth examining how the portrayal of the dark side has changed since Disney got a hold of it, that the filmmakers decided to lean into the fashy imagery rather than away from it. And yes,
Absolutely.
Star Wars merchandising has always heavily relied on marketing bad characters like Darth Vader and Boba Fett in order to help earn that sweet green. But the significance of iconography can shift over time, and I do think it's worth examining the difference of selling cute, fashy bad guy characters in 1977 and selling the same in 2018.
I thought that was a pretty interesting video.
Absolutely. No, she's dead on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she put more thought into it than I would have. I was just like, yeah, this is just very disturbing that anybody who's drawn to this should be put on a fucking list. That's where I come from. That's where I'm, you know.
Okay, I'll put it like this. I'm not anti-list, but if we're going to make a list, we should at least think about who we're going to put on the list, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, put on this. See, if you're a fashion apologist, then you go on a fucking list. I don't know.
All right. Well, that's gonna do it for tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to everybody who's been watching. We've helped a little bit of an audience for the evening.
I'm happy about that.
Which is good. We should share this show on YouTube, get people to sub. You can also support Good Morning Comrade by going to patreon.com/Good Morning Comrade. You can be like Ty Jitty, Michael H, Dan O, Jonathan H, Timothy C, Dragonslayer 19, Andy L, Gary W, Rachel K, Kenneth F, Adam R, Trey M, Watermelon Pickle, and our newest subscriber, Penelope D.
Baller. Watermelon Pickle. I love that name.
That's a pretty good name.
All right. Well, let me get out of here. It's almost midnight.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm gonna do some editing, but everybody else have a wonderful evening. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.